Hello and welcome to a quick video from me, this tutor, and in this video we're going to be looking at the AQA topic, Elizabethan England, and we're looking at the how convincing question. We're going to focus our topic on the Golden Age of Queen Elizabeth. Okay, so let's get straight into the question then. So the question says, how convincing is interpretation A about the Golden Age in the time of Queen Elizabeth? So here is our interpretation. As you know, the questions are always structured in the same way. So your question one will always be an interpretation question. You will get a piece of writing or a picture that is a modern interpretation of the past. And you have to decide, is this interpretation correct? So I've got a more detailed video on this, on how convincing is an interpretation on Elizabeth's marriage. So if you want more detail on how to answer this question, look at that video. This is just a quick fire video going through a question. So that's why we're getting straight into the planning and thinking about it. So have a read through the interpretation there. Can you work out two messages from it? Now, as I say in my other video, we need to write two paragraphs and assess two messages. So you should always be able to find two ideas in the interpretation. So pause me now, have a read through. Can you find two messages? Okay, so here's the message I've found then. So I've said the rich and nobles only had a golden age via the trade, homes and fashion of the era. The poor didn't really gain anything from the golden age. And you could obviously reference poor laws to support that if you wanted to. I've already made a little hint there to knowledge. So your next task now is to think about what knowledge supports this or doesn't support it. So the way to explain whether an interpretation is convincing or not is to use your knowledge of the events. So we're going to say, yes, it is convincing the rich and nobles had a golden age via trade by talking about trade companies or fashion and giving your examples. And we might say it's convincing about the poor because of the poor laws, etc. So spend a few minutes now listing some knowledge around your revision guide page that might explain how this idea is convincing or not. Okay, so here's what I've got then. So I've got, it is convincing the rich and nobles had a golden age as they built grand homes. You could reference like Hardwick Hall, for instance, and many earned huge fortune from monopolies. Essex had a sweet wine monopoly. You could also maybe reference trade as well, with the gentry earning lots of money from trade. So Drake obviously earning huge amounts of money from trade as well. It's not so convincing as nobles benefited from land and title as well, whereas gentry had to earn their money, Drake circumnavigating the globe and rising himself up the great chain of being, whereas a noble would have land and privilege already and didn't really have to work for it. What about the poor gain nothing from the golden age? Well, that is convincing. So we've got the poor living conditions. You might think about peasant homes, disease, vagrants, poverty, how the population is rising and causing problems with poor people around towns and cities. You might be referencing Norwich, Ipswich, or York in terms of your poverty knowledge. So do you have a look at the poverty pages in the revision guide or my poverty video for explanations about that? It's not convincing because the poor benefit in some aspects. So jobs and exploration or trade industries might have been something to discuss. So obviously it would be poor sailors on the boat with Drake circumnavigating the globe and getting a little bit of the money from their voyages. Also, the poor people could benefit from the great entertainment. So rich people had more money. They're investing in entertainment like theatres. And of course, the pit, the floor of the theatre was for the poor people to pay a penny and watch the great shows of the time. Okay, so how do we structure this? So we want to still do our peel paragraphs. So we'll say the interpretation is very or partly convincing because, and set up a reason. Okay, so it's very convincing because the rich benefited lots from the golden age. We then give our example from the extract. So paraphrase it or quote something from the extract for one sentence. And then we're going to explain this is convincing because, or this is not convincing because. And here we need to use our knowledge. Two, maybe three sentences of knowledge to explain your idea. And then a furthermore. So if you think it's really convincing, give a furthermore. If you think it's not so convincing, give a however and a bit more knowledge to explain your idea. So let's give this a go. So let's do one about the rich and the nobles benefiting. So I've already done the first sentence for you. So the interpretation is very convincing about Elizabeth's golden age because the nobles and gentry did benefit a lot and they experienced a golden age. For example, so now we need one sentence from the extract, not lots and lots of sentences, one sentence. I want to be quick and concise and to the point with this. Pause me now. What would you put down? And write this in your revision guide, your answer. So I've said, it says that they were the lucky ones that benefited from increased trade and wealth. So I've just given a tiny little quote and then a paraphrase of the idea, the message about the nobles and gentry. So now I'm going to explain. This is convincing about Elizabeth's Golden Age because. So pause me now and explain a couple of bits of knowledge that back up the idea that they are indeed the lucky ones benefiting. Okay, so what I've put is, I've said this is convincing about Elizabeth's Golden Age because some nobles developed huge wealth from the increased trade via Elizabeth's new companies like the Eastlands and East India Company. Again, jobs and careers like Ralph Fitch, who led the East India Company. Also, many nobles received valuable monopolies like Essex Sweets Wine Monopoly that gave them huge wealth. This meant that nobles had the wealth to build grand houses and buy fashionable items. Okay, so I've gone, it's very convincing, so I'm going to do a furthermore. If you've given a slightly different idea, you think it's only partly convincing, give a however, criticise the idea. So let's give an idea now. So pause me now, see if you can give a furthermore. So I've said, furthermore, it is convincing as members of the gentry were able to climb the great chain of being due to the Golden Age opportunities. For instance, Drake's raided the Spanish due to their golden developments of their empire, and a golden era of English sailing helped him do this as well. This meant some gentry people benefited from the wealth of the era. So I did Drake and other gentry people could rise up through the great chain of being and become knighted and hugely wealthy. It's obviously one of the aspects of the Golden Age, isn't it? So now over to you then. Have a go at the last paragraph yourself, thinking about making a clear idea of a point. So secondly, the interpretation is very convincing because, or partly convincing because, give a little paraphrase. So the poor gain nothing. Then explain with your knowledge. We've got knowledge about poor quality housing. We've got about disease. Have a look at your poor law pages. See if you can give some ideas about how they were in poverty, overpopulation, lack of jobs. Give some ideas there. If you think it's really convincing, then give a furthermore. Maybe you could talk about poor law in more detail. We've got some ideas there that suggest a however. So maybe you think it's only partly convincing and give a however. So good luck with that. Okay, well, I hope you found it useful to see an example answer for that question. As I said, do look at the marriage video as well for more detail on how to answer that how convincing question, and do obviously keep working through the revision guide and developing your skills. Well, bye-bye for now.